socio-economic development across the continent and through a number of sectors. And it is indeed an honor to have the architect and indeed the founding father of this vision with us in this room today, His Excellency President Mbeki. Today, Africa stands at the defining moment in the evolution of the global economy. Rising protectionism, geopolitical fragmentation, disrupted supply chains, and shifting global financial systems, compelling Africa to strengthen its own internal markets, industrial capacity, and economic resilience. In this changing global landscape, deepening intra-Africa trade is no longer optional. It's an economic imperative for sovereignty, for resilience, and for industrialization, and of course, sustainable growth. Notwithstanding the continent consisting of a population of over 1.4 billion people, our intra-Africa trade still accounts for approximately 15% of our formal trade, significantly lower than other regions, and demonstrates the urgent need to remove barriers to trade, improve logistics, and strengthen regional value chains. Africa's demographic dividend, the world's youngest population, presents an unparalleled opportunity. By investing in skills, entrepreneurship, innovation, and industrial development, intra-Africa trade can become a major engine for youth employment and inclusive growth. This morning, we convene to reflect on the ideas that inform the creation of this organization, NEPAD, how they have evolved over time, and their continued relevance to the present and the future. Therefore, this session should reaffirm the centrality of African ownership and the ambitions of Agenda 2063, while exploring the critical role of African business, African development finance institutions, and strategic African partners in shaping the next phase of Africa's development trajectory towards the Africa we want. Our program this morning will consist of 5 segments: the opening session, a keynote address delivered by His Excellency, the Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa, a dynamic panel moderated by Dr. Mbuyiseni Ndlozi, a reflective session by His Excellency, the former President of the Republic of South Africa, and then a closing session. And in between, we'll be blessed with musical rendition by Dr. Jonathan Butler. I promise to have you out of here by 12:15 at the latest, and I can guarantee you, Mr. Deputy President, that this will be shorter than any cabinet meeting you've ever had. So therefore, without any further ado, allow me to welcome to the stage Her Excellency, Madame Nardos Bekele-Thomas, to deliver the opening remarks. And as she comes up, she is, of course, the Chief Executive Officer of the African Union Development Agency. She's the first woman to lead this organization, a distinguished Pan-African development leader with over 4 decades of global experience. And since assuming office in 2022, she held a historic institutional transformation, expanding the agency's resource mobilization from $30 million right up to $300 million, advancing Agenda 2063, implemented across the continent. So prior to joining the African Union Development Agency, she also held various leadership roles on the continent and within the United Nations system, including, by the way, leading the office of the former Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. She holds a master's in economic development, monetary economics, and econometrics from the University of New York. Please welcome Her Excellency, Madame Nardos Bekele-Thomas.
Thank you very much, Director of Program. That would be a good introduction, for my future when I look for a job. So, please bear that in mind. Thank you very much. Your Excellency, Mr. Paul Mashatile, Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa, thank you very much for really taking time. I know that this is a busy time for you. And Your Excellency, President Thabo Mbeki, the architect of this project, whose vision gave a generation of Africans the courage to believe that we could define our own destiny. And Honorable Philippus Katemelo, representing the chairperson of the African Union Commission, and also the president of represent Mr. Max Bokwana, Chief Executive Officer of the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, representatives of UNISA, and I would like to recognize the CEO of the Siemens, and also CEO, Diplomatic Corps, captains of industry, development finance institutions, partners, and friends of Africa. Good morning. It's indeed a privilege to welcome you to this high-level business breakfast, convened under the theme, Rebuilding Africa's Development Consensus, Regional Integration, African Ownership, and Continental Renewal. 25 years ago, a group of African leaders, visionary leaders, made a decision that was radical in its simplicity. They chose to take responsibility, not to wait for the world to develop Africa, but to present to the world a plan authored by Africans, governed by African priorities, and accountable to African people. That decision became NEPAD. This morning, we gather not only to honor what that decision produced, but to ask with honesty and urgency what must now come next. I will not offer a speech of celebration alone. 25 years demands candor and discipline. It demands that we ask whether the institutions, the capital, markets, and partnerships we have built are equal to the Africa we now seek to build. The African Union Development Agency, NEPAD, is not a ceremonial institution. It's the African Union's development implementing agency, and like the program director said, the premier development agency of Africa. Our role is to close the gap between continental ambition and delivery on the ground. In less than 4 years, the agency's program budget grew tenfold, from $30 million to over $300 million, with budget execution consistently exceeding 95%. That growth was earned through performance, not advocacy. It's what responsible ownership of an institution looks like. Allow me to speak to 6 areas where this mandate is now urgent, and where the choices before this room will define Africa's next quarter century: ownership, infrastructure, capital, productive capacity, mobility, and coordination. The African Union Development Agency, NEPAD, today still operates with approximately 90% of its program support funded by development partners. 90% of its program. I say this not as a criticism. Their solidarity has been real. I say it as a challenge to ourselves. You cannot build an institution you are not willing to fund. The flexibility any institution needs to respond to crisis, to take bold decisions, to move with speed, is constrained when its budget lives elsewhere. Consider this. The African Union Development Agency, NEPAD, created to implement the Vision 2063, Africa's Vision 2063, its core budget today stands at just $6 million. We're asking member states to increase that to at least $20 million per year. not as generosity, but as a statement of political intent. The agency cannot sustain delivery, attract partners, or retain talent on $6 million. When you underfund your own institution, you signal to the world that you do not fully believe in it. And yet, the demand for this agency's work is growing. Today, as I stand here, 16 member states, including the already existing Kenya and Nigeria, formally requested national offices. And every time I visit a member state country, the leaders would say, we want you here. We are expected to support the implementation across all 55 AU member states and 8 regional economic communities. That demand must be matched with resourcing. Ownership that is not reflected in the budget is not ownership. The second one is infrastructure financing. Africa's infrastructure needs are estimated at about $130 billion and 170 billion every year, between 130 and 170, with an annual financing gap between 68 billion and 108 billion dollars. Under the Pan-African Infrastructure Development Agency, which we call PIDA, Priority Action Plan 2, the African Union Development Agency is advancing 69 flagship regional projects valued at $161 billion. The roads, ports, railways, power systems, and digital networks that must connect African economies to one another. Let me give you 2 concrete examples of what this means on the ground. In West Africa, we are coordinating the Abidjan-Lagos corridor, 1,080 kilometers, 6-lane highway connecting 5 countries across the busiest economic corridor on the continent, with detailed engineering design now complete. In East and Central Africa, a 510-kilometer power transmission line now links the electricity grids of Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, and the DRC, connecting 21 previously off-grid villages, reaching 198,000 people and creating over 400 jobs. And that is directly. Directly, I mean, when we talk about the corridor, it's in millions, right? Through the NEPAD Infrastructure Project Preparation Facility, 113 regional projects have been supported with $124 million committed and more than $13 billion leveraged in downstream investment. Through the Africa Team Platform, the Africa Team Platform is a platform that is comprised of all the 8 regional economic communities, ourselves, the AFC, FTA, the CDC, and all the AU entities working together. We have identified over 300 projects worth more than $500 billion, which are consolidated into a coordinated pipeline. The Luanda Financing Summit, which took place last year, mobilized $18 billion for investor-endorsed projects. The Luanda Financing Summit was really, our flagship summit last year. It mobilized $18 billion for investor-endorsed projects with a further $43 billion pipeline behind it. But the model must shift. Too much of Africa's infrastructure has been financed through sovereign debt. The interest burden falls on the citizen, and we are seeing that cost in many countries today. Our work with the Alliance of African Multilateral Financial Institutions, with $1.5 billion commitment, including $100 million for project preparation, backs continental priorities with African capital. It is the model we must scale. The Development Bank of Southern Africa must be part of that same architecture. African money, African governance, African development. And this requires what? This requires, again, for member states to have interest, to have full faith in their own development institution, their development finance institutions. They must invest in these development finance institutions. We cannot accept our institutional funds being kept elsewhere when our development financial institutions are starving from capital. We must reverse all this. Like you did, make us understand, Your Excellency, President Mbeki, the illicit financial flows. We must stop that. It's a bleeding, it's a crime. When our institutions are starving from funds, when our people are starving from lack of jobs, what's wrong with us? We should collectively condemn all this. And we should redirect our capital to our development priorities. And the third one is, we need to really have, if we want regional integration, there should be a regulatory harmonization. A road corridor, a power line, a railway, or a digital network cannot function as a regional asset if every border creates new delays because of its bureaucracies, because of the different policies, because of the different regulatory frameworks. Many infrastructure projects take too long because they cross several jurisdictions, several regulatory systems, and several political calendars. These political calendars are also really bottlenecks, as if everything should stop when there is election, there is a change in government. And people live there. Therefore, the African Union Development Agency, NEPAD's role is to help countries solve these practical barriers. We convene member states and regional economic communities. We support alignment around standards, permits, procurements, tariffs, and implementation responsibilities, Your Excellency. We are currently rolling out 32 operational one-stop border posts, with 85 more planned, systematically turning border crossing from a constraint into a trade facilitation asset. The results are measurable. A survey of 8 one-stop posts in East Africa recorded an average 42% reduction in border dwell times, and in some cases, as much as 98%. That directly reduces trade costs and improves corridor competitiveness for business. Regional integration is not achieved through declarations alone. It is achieved through the hard work of making countries implement together. And the fourth one is the African capital and industrial capability. Africa currently accounts for less than 2% of global manufacturing value added. For a continent of 1.4 billion people with abundant resources and fast-growing markets, that is not destiny. It's a choice we can reverse. The Dangote refinery is instructive. With capacity of approximately 650,000 barrels per day and investment estimated at $19 to $20 billion, it demonstrates what African capital can do when deployed at scale into production, into processing, logistics, and industrial capability. That is what African capital must increasingly do, not sit in foreign financial systems, while opportunities on this continent are financed by others. Let's have confidence in our continent. At the African Union Development Agency, NEPAD, we are supporting this shift directly. The Homegrown Solutions Accelerator has scaled African-owned innovations across 36 countries, reaching 48 million people annually, mobilizing $82 million and generate $25 million in annual manufacturing value, demonstrating that African enterprise, properly supported, can build industrial ecosystem at scale. Our Achille AI platform, co-developed with Meta and Deloitte, is providing African MSMEs with AI-powered access to barriers to enterprise growth on the continent. Africa must not only trade more, Africa must, first of all, produce more. The fifth is AFCFTA and production capacity. The AFCFTA gives the continent across access to market of $1.4 billion, 1.4 billion people, and a combined GDP of approximately $3.4 trillion. You know it all. But the market only becomes transformative when countries can produce for it. Today, inter-African trade, like the program director said, accounts for only 15% of our total trade. Actually, it decreased from 17% to 15%. It's really telling. If we lower tariff walls while still importing what we should be manufacturing, we have created a market for others, not a platform for ourselves. The African Union Development Agency, your premier development agency's central contribution to AFCFTA is the activation of priority value chains. In health, our African Medicine Regulatory Harmonization Program has cut medicine registration timelines in the East African community from an average of 2 to 3 years to under 12 months only, laying the foundation for continental pharmaceutical manufacturing. Our 24 priority medical products initiative is now scaling domestic production of critical medicines, antiretrovirals, because PEPFAR is no more there, vaccines, diagnostics, and oncology treatments, directly reducing import dependence and building health sovereignty. In agriculture, our comprehensive agricultural development program underpins food systems transformation across the continent, with billions mobilized for climate resilient agricultural systems in 2025 alone. We're scaling homegrown school feeding programs that simultaneously deliver. And this, you can see it from the example of Ethiopia. We are your agency. So sometimes, you know, the progress made by countries, because they're made with our contributions, with their development agencies' contributions, you do not hear the African Union Development Agency in the storyline. Through CIFA, we have deployed $120 million across 48 projects in 8 countries, training workers in construction, agro-processing, health and digital services, the productive sectors that must feed the AFCFTA's value chains. And coordination. Your Excellency, this is really very important for us. Africans still need visas to travel in Africa. An African professional often finds it easier to reach a European city than a neighboring capital. The free movement of skills, expertise, and knowledge remains one of the most under-addressed dimensions of continental integration. And recent trends have moved in the wrong direction, and we have seen it here in South Africa. We are even having, Your Excellency, Deputy President, and Your Excellency, President Mbeki, we're having difficulties in bringing African experts here. We're having difficulties holding seminars and workshops here because of the visa restriction. So, you know, we need to really understand, you know, African integration cannot take place if there is no mobility, if experts cannot go from one place to the other, if knowledge cannot go from one place to the other. If that's our main asset are people. And I think, you know, the free movement of skills, expertise, and knowledge remains one of the most under-addressed dimensions of continental integration. and recent trends have moved in the wrong direction. CFAS, we have a program called the Skills Initiative for Africa with $120 million deployed across 48 projects. It is building the workforce that the AFCFTA and Africa's industrial future require. But none of that investment reaches its full potential if our people cannot move to deploy what they know. Mobility is not a migration issue. It is an economic issue. It is an industrial issue. It is a knowledge issue. All 6 areas come together in one responsibility: coordination. Africa is not a blank canvas on which development partners may paint their own stories. Africa has Agenda 2063. Africa has the second 10-year implementation plan. In 2025, 25 member states and 8 regional economic communities contributed to the first Continental Progress Report on Agenda 2063 using the Agenda 2063 digital platform, giving Africa for the first time a unified evidence base to track its own development and direct partner contributions where they are needed most. Coordination has delivered real results. Under Africa Leadership Meeting, Malawi doubled its health budget and Zambia increased health allocations by 20%. Because partners aligned with what African governments themselves defined as priority. That is what genuine partnership looks like. Your Excellency, President Mbeki, when you and your peers launched NEPAD 25 years ago, you told the world that Africa was not a problem to be solved by others, but a project to be led by Africans. Today, the institutions are here. The frameworks are here. The results are beginning to show. The question for this generation is whether we will fund them, trust them, and defend them with the same seriousness, with the same dedication, with the same commitment with which they were conceived. Coming from the UN, I had to convince our UN colleagues, and I say, UN, now I am on the other side. I'm with the AU. So what you need to do is really support the AU priorities, the African Union priorities. And I'm so glad, and I thank my sister, the DSG, Amina Mohammed, when I said we have got the second 10-year implementation plan. Yes, there is the development SDGs, the goals, and we have got our vision, Agenda 2063. We can have 2 visions, it doesn't matter, but 1 implementation plan. And Your Excellencies, I'm pleased to announce that the UN has accepted that they will work within the second 10-year implementation plan. And we have accepted that slogan, 2 agenda, 1 plan. The only problem we have is that we are really competing for the same resources that are there, and that will take time. And I'm trying to see what we can do, because if they come to support us, we are the umbrella, development agency. Theirs is to come and support. So, we are getting there, but not yet. So, I think, if we have to really go back and take that same conviction, that same dedication, that same commitment that our founding leaders have put to NEPAD, we need to really move fast and accelerate, our implementation. We can do that. And, when we do things, it must be really practical. If we want African institutions, we must fund them. These are the principles. If we want infrastructure, we must prepare and finance it differently. If we want industrialization, we must invest in production. If we want the AFCFTA to succeed, we must build value chains. If we want integration, Africans must be able to move. And if we want genuine partnership, partners must align with Africa's own agenda. This is the development consensus we must rebuild. 25 years ago, NEPAD declared that Africa could lead its own development. Today, the African Union Development Agency, NEPAD, your premier development agency, carries that mandate into a new phase to help Africa finance, build, produce, trade, integrate, and deliver. That is our work. That is our responsibility. And that is our commitment. And that should be a collective commitment. I thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Your Excellency, for those opening remarks and highlighting those key areas that are most urgent insofar as the mandate of the African Union Development Agency is concerned. Mr. Deputy President and Mr. President, one of the things the CEO did not mention is that although she grew the organization from 30 million to 300 million, she has given us a task a few weeks ago of growing the organization to $1 billion by 2028. $1 billion. I'm glad you clapped, because when we were with Lucanio and the team, we were very clear about who we should bring into the room. And as the saying goes, there is no free breakfast. We look to you to contribute as Africans towards this enormous task. So thank you very much once again, Your Excellency. At this time, I would like to call on the Honorable Philippus Wido Katamelo. And before he comes up, the Honorable Philippus Wido Katamelo is the Deputy Speaker of the 8th National Assembly of the Republic of Namibia. He's also a member of the 7th Pan-African Parliament, where he serves as the chairperson of the Permanent Committee on Cooperation, International Relations and Conflict Resolution. He previously served as in the 7th National Assembly from 2020 to 2025 as a member and chairperson of the Budget and Finance Committee. Prior to that, he was a member of the National Council of Namibia from 2010 to 2020, and before entering active politics, Honorable Katamelo worked at Telecom Namibia as operations manager until his election to the National Council in 2010. Honorable Katamelo studied electrical engineering at the Cape Peninsula University of Technology, and he holds a postgraduate diploma and a master's of business administration from the University of India. In addition, he completed a management development program at the Stellenbosch University. He seems to love South Africa. So, Honorable Deputy Speaker, you have the floor. Thank you very much.
Good morning. But I will greet you properly. Yes. Your Excellency Paul Mashatile, the Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa, Your Excellency Mr. Nardos Bekele-Thomas, the Chief Executive Officer of the African Union Development Agency, NEPAD, honorable members of parliament that are present, former President Thabo Mbeki, captains of industries and finance, distinguished philanthropists, global investors, leaders of the continental and regional institutions, members of the diplomatic corps, if they are present, esteemed guests, ladies and gentlemen, fellow Africans, good morning. Dumelang, en in die Westkap moet ek tog maar 'n bietjie Afrikaans praat nie. Goeiemôre. Ek het vir ons die boertaal geleer, maar een ding, hulle het nie ons taal geleer nie, maar ons kan hulle se taal praat. Nou kan ons vir hulle skinner. Ndiyathetha also kancinci ndivela elanga ebooks. So I'm a Capetonian. Okay, CPQT was not a joke, man. You can see. Okay. I'm both honored and profoundly privileged to address this distinguished gathering on the occasion of NEPAD 25th anniversary high-level breakfast meeting under the theme, Rebuilding Africa's Development consensus, regional integration, and African ownership and continental renewal. Today, we gathered here not merely to commemorate an institution or simply to celebrate a milestone on our continental journey. We are gathered at a defining moment in Africa's history, a moment that calls for strategic clarity, courageous leadership, and above all, a renewed commitment towards the unfinished project of African transformation. This gathering brings together policymakers, business leaders, investors, and institutions committed to Africa's future. And it is most befitting that we meet on the Eye of Africa Day, because the question before us is a simple one. What kind of Africa shall we build for the next generation? Fellow Africans, 25 years ago, the African himself, you know, he is NEPAD, emerged as one of the boldest expressions of African self-belief in post-colonial area. It was founded on the conviction that Africa's development could no longer be outsourced, fragmented, and externally defined. Its founders understood that political liberation without economic sovereignty would remain incomplete and a pipe dream. They understood that no continent can have dignity while remaining dependent on others for food systems, industrial production, technology, infrastructure, finance, and strategic direction. Above all, they understood that Africa's future must be designed, financed, industrialized, and defended by Africans themselves. That vision remains urgent and relevant today as it was 25 years ago. But despite all this progress, Africa still confronts itself at a historic paradox. How can the world's youngest continent remain home to such high unemployment and inequality? How can a continent rich in natural resources continue exporting raw materials while importing finished goods at a premium cost? How can Africa, our own Africa, with its strategic minerals, agricultural abundance, entrepreneurial energy, and creative economy still occupy the margins of the value chains? This is not merely economic questions. These are questions of sovereignty, leadership, and continental ambition. The world around us is changing rapidly. Geopolitical tensions are rising. Global supply chains are being reconfigured. Technological disruption is reshaping production and trade, and climate change is redefining development and security. In such, Africa cannot afford fragmentation. We cannot afford dependency disguised as partnership. And we certainly cannot afford to approach the future as 55 disconnected markets negotiating from a position of vulnerability. The era before us demands scale, coordination, and African unity as an economic strategy and purpose. That's why regional integration is no longer optional. It has become extremely essential. Words must start to have meaning. As a member of the Pan-African Parliament, I was given a Pan-African passport, red for that matter. The same red I got from Namibia, and the same red all other Africans get. But one of the most astonishing things that struck me is when you get that passport, they tell you this country and this country, they don't recognize it. And this for, you must apply a visa. But all these countries send delegates to form the African Union. You see that our biggest problem is not innovation, it's understanding the quest so that the left hand does not be in competition with the right hand. Africans, these things have killed us. We don't need schools. It's not rocket science. It's a commitment. My brother is a judge in Namibia and once told him, there is no amount of legislation that can regulate a moral issue. We need to raise ourselves. And that conscious judgment is not somebody on you, it's you yourself on yourself. And that nobility, we owe it to the next generation. The African Continental Free Trade Area represents more than a trade agreement. To a competitive industrial and manufacturing powerhouse. But integration must move beyond declarations. It must become tangible, operational, and functional. Integration must live in the highways that connect African economies, in modern rail systems, efficient ports, integrated power pools, digital infrastructure, and regional financial systems that mobilize African capital for African priorities. This is precisely where the Pan-African Parliament has a historic and a unique responsibility. The Pan-African Parliament must increasingly become strategic legislative partner to African capital, African enterprise, and African industrialization. We must work with national parliaments to create the enabling environment for African investors. We must champion harmonized commercial frameworks that reduce the cost of doing business across borders. We must push for the removal of unnecessary regulatory barriers that continue to constrain African entrepreneurship and inter-African trade. We must support policies that modernize custom systems, simplify border administration, and reduce immigration bottlenecks that undermine the free movement of African talent, goods, services, and capital. But no continent can industrialize while its own people struggle to move freely across its borders. The Pan-African Parliament therefore stands firmly in support of full implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area, the single African air transport market, and the long-term vision of truly integrated common African market. We believe the time has come to accelerate the practical foundation of continental economic sovereignty, a connected Africa, a mobile Africa, a competitive Africa, and a financially integrated Africa. These are not abstract aspirations. These are strategic imperatives because integration lowers cost, expands market, attracts investment, strengthens bargaining power, and transforms Africa into one of the most consequential economic blocks of the 21st century. Africa today does not suffer from a shortage of vision. Our own Africa suffers from a shortage of implementation at scale. What we require now is execution, execution, and execution. Execution financed by African capital, execution driven by African enterprise, execution protected by African institutions, and execution sustained by the long-term continental thinking. This is where the role of business becomes indispensable. The millions must now talk. The future of Africa will not be built by governments alone. It will be built through a strategic alliance between the public leadership, the private capital, development finance institution, academia, philanthropy, and civic society. To the captains of industry gathered here today, Africa needs more than investment. It needs builders. Builders of industries, infrastructure, technology, ecosystem, financial institutions, energy systems, and Pan-African value chains. The next chapter of Africa development must increasingly be financed by African pension funds, African sovereign wealth funds, African banks, African entrepreneurs, and African institutional investors. For too long, Africa's wealth has financed the growth of other regions, while our own developmental needs remain unfunded. That model is neither sustainable nor acceptable. Ladies and gentlemen, the rise of Africa will not come through charity. It will come through strategic investment, industrial capability, institutional strength, and continental confidence. And let's be clear, Pan-Africanism in the 21st century must become economic. Economic Pan-Africanism means integrated markets, free movement of goods, capital, talent, and ideas, harmonized regulation, stronger regional manufacturing, and investment in African innovation. It means ensuring that Africa's resources generate African prosperity. No African country, regardless of size or resource of wealth, can sustainably compete alone in an emerging global order. Our strength lies in the collective scale, our democratic power, and our strategic resources, our entrepreneurial energy, and our shared destiny. Finally, as we mark 25 years of NEPAD, this is not a moment of nostalgia. It's a moment of renewal, courage, strategic realism, and decisive continental leadership. The generation that founded the Organization of African Unity, the predecessor to AU, fought and achieved political liberation. The generation that established NEPAD fought for developmental coordination, and the African is present. You can tap on his wisdom because he had to know what he wanted to achieve. Our generation must now secure economic sovereignty. History has entrusted us with that noble responsibility. The future generation will ask whether we transform Africa from aspiration into implementation, whether we mobilize African wealth for African transformation, whether we had courage to think continentally and act collectively, and whether we left behind a more prosperous, more integrated, more united Africa than the one we inherited. Africa's story is still being written, and I firmly believe that the 21st century can indeed become Africa's century, not by accident, but by design. A century shaped by African leadership, African enterprise, African innovation, African capital, and most fundamentally, African unity. If we act with courage, discipline, vision, and collective purpose, future generations will remember this era as a moment of Africa decisively from potential to power. Let this gathering therefore mark not only the celebration of NEPAD's legacy, but the beginning of a continental compact for implementation, industrialization, and African renewal.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. And of course, for reminding us about a number of things which I will not get into. Safe to say that we have to move into the era of execution, execution, and execution. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point in time, I'd like to call on the stage Dr. Jonathan Butler. Dr. Jonathan Butler, he's the recipient of the Order of Ikamanga in silver. And this is his first performance after receiving this order. Just a few, so you are lucky to have fresh from the grill today. And of course, as you know, this remarkable award was bestowed for his contribution to the arts and music in particular, as a jazz, R&B, and gospel singer, songwriter, and producer. He calls himself a lighty from Athlone. We call him a son of the soil and a legend of this nation in the arts. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Turn it up a little bit.
In life, you must be tuned up, you know. So I tune because I want to play you. Mr. President Thabo Mbeki, I wanted to say it's so good to see you again. It was the years I met you, I was black. My hair was black. Now we both gray, and but praise God for that. You know, I'm proudly South African, and I've been away from home for almost 40 years, and I speak about South Africa and our story all the time. We have an amazing story, and I'm going to continue to share that story with the world. And there's some eloquent people that spoke here this morning. This gentleman, man, you're incredible. This is for a song I wrote that the government of the time banned from the radio station. Yeah, 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 oh, yeah, 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 oh. The boy became a grown-up man the moment that they said you never can. They said you may be very good, but down below you'll stay, it's understood. No, he says it's wrong to judge the state of man by whether fate has made him pale or tan. I do believe, in order that truth can be real, we must heal our land, yeah, yeah, yeah. We must heal our land today, oh, yeah. We must heal our land, oh, oh, oh. Heal our land today. Don't delay, don't delay, don't delay, hey, hey, hey. Don't delay. Listen, the girl became a raging fire the moment they said forget desire. Desire. This land of opportunity is not the same for you and me. And we be wise, and we be wise. No, she will not bow and meekly stand aside. She will not leave to please their selfish pride. She be still, in order that truth may be real. We gotta heal this land. People, we gotta heal this land. Today, not tomorrow, but today. Heal our land, oh, heal our land today. Listen, we will not wait. We will not wait till tomorrow. See the children of our land demand today. You and your promises are low. You only stand in freedom's way. Heal our land, oh yes. Heal our land, heal our land today. There's an urgency in this place. There's an urgency in this place. There's an urgency in the song. Can you hear it? There's an urgency. There's an emergency. We gotta heal this nation, oh God, we gotta, Lord. I hope you know I gotta say, heal our land today. Heal our land today, yeah. Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. talking about healing this land, talking about healing the nation, talking about the children of our nation, talking about our legacy. I'm talking about our legacy. I'm talking about our roots. We got to heal the land. Shoot. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. I don't know how I feel like singing. I know you want to talk about business. You want to talk about Pan-Africa, but I want to sing. Some of y'all need to learn how to sing. You're going to solve a lot more problems if you learn how to sing. You got to learn to play the guitar like... You got to learn to play the guitar like that so you can feel the freedom in my spirit right now. I'm proud to be you, Ubuntu. I'm proud to be you. I'm proud to be you. I feel like I'm standing in a room full of my fathers, my brothers, and my sisters. We gotta heal our land today. Yeah. Oh. Talk about healing.
We'll give him another round of applause. I don't know about you, but if I was in the church right now, I would say I feel the Spirit. Thank you very much, Dr. Jonathan Butler. He'll come back later. He didn't know that. I don't think it was by chance that he's here today. It was not by accident. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, at this point in time, I'd like to introduce to you our keynote speaker. And it's an honor for me to introduce the Deputy President, Siposoka Paulus Mashatile. Born in Geraldsville, Pretoria, he rose from student activism in the Congress of South African Students to become the president of the Alexander Youth Congress, later serving as Assistant General Secretary of the United Democratic Front. His journey from activism and detention to leadership reflects resilience and commitment to our democracy. Deputy President Mashatile has held senior roles in the African National Congress, including Chairperson and Secretary of Gauteng, Treasury General, Acting Secretary General, and Deputy Secretary General. In government, he has served as the Premier of Gauteng, Deputy and Minister of Arts and Culture, and Chairperson of Parliament's Appropriation Committee. He played a pivotal role in developing the Gautrain, installing the Nelson Mandela statue at the Union Buildings, and repositioning the creative industries through the Mzansi Gold economy. Since 2024, he has served as the Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa, entrusted with driving land reform, strengthening municipalities, leading the fight against HIV and AIDS, and promoting social cohesion. He's also the Special Envoy to South Sudan, supporting the peace process, and chairs the GNU Clearinghouse Mechanism, holding together the Government of National Unity. Please stand as you welcome His Excellency, Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa.
Please be seated. Thank you very much, Program Director, Mr. Linton Nkunu. Your Excellency, former President of the Republic of South Africa, President Thabo Mbeki, the Chairperson of the AU Commission, His Excellency Mohammed Ali Yusuf, represented by Honorable Philippus Katamelo, Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly of Namibia, and also a member of the Pan-African Parliament. The Chief Executive Officer of the African Union Development Agency, AUDA-NEPAD, Her Excellency Nardos Bekele-Thomas, UNISA Principal and Vice Chancellor, Professor Puleng Lenkabula, distinguished ministers, deputy ministers, members of parliament, leaders of political parties here present. I saw Ntate Maimani somewhere, Mokhai Tsudumel. I haven't seen our leaders, but if they are here, we recognize them. Leaders of representatives of regional economic communities, our valued development partners from the private sector, civil society, and the diaspora. Let me also recognize the man who has just soothed our souls, Dr. Jonathan Butler, Delight van Ethlon. We are happy that you are here to join us this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, a good morning, Dumelan, Abshen, and Dimachero. Goeiemorgen. 25 years ago in Abuja, President Thabo Mbeki stood before Africa and the world and declared that the tasks we face on the continent are the same as those we face at home: poverty, underdevelopment, marginalization, illiteracy, disease, and instability. Many of us could still recall the great African giants who were there: Olusegun Obasanjo of Nigeria, Abdelaziz Bouteflika of Algeria, Hosni Mubarak of Egypt, and Abdoulaye Wade of Senegal, all nodding in affirmation, bearing witness to a truth that bound us together. In that honor, NEPAD was born as Africa's own pledge. It was born to promote accelerated growth and sustainable development, to eradicate widespread and severe poverty, and to hold the marginalization of Africa in the globalization process. As we mark Africa Month and celebrate 20 years of NEPAD, we return to that founding vision: an integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa, driven by its own citizens and represented by a dynamic force in the global arena. This vision, rooted in Pan-Africanism, is driven by the goal of empowering the continent to control its own destiny. Ladies and gentlemen, we gather today at a time when South Africa has, over the past few weeks, observed acts of violence against foreign nationals. While acknowledging concerns about illegal foreign nationals involved in crime, we strongly condemn the anti-migrant protests and xenophobic violence. And we urge law enforcement to address these issues through legal means, not mob violence. These violent acts, as mentioned by President Cyril Ramaphosa, are shameful and do not reflect the views of South Africans or government policy. We must therefore stand together as government, traditional authorities, civil society, and migrant communities to combat this violence. Such collaboration is crucial in affirming the dignity of all Africans and all African lives. Today, AUDA-NEPAD functions as the main execution arm of the African Union's Agenda 2063. The agency emphasized the importance of African self-determination and focuses on building democratic societies, enhancing intra-Africa trade, and utilizing local resources for development. To foster a new development consensus, AUDA-NEPAD identifies 3 essential pillars: regional integration to strengthen unity and economic collaboration, African ownership, promoting the idea that Africa's future should be shaped by its own people, and continental renewal to ensure democracy, industrialization, and social cohesion, which are vital for peace and dignity. This consensus links the promise of Abuja to the aspiration of Agenda 2063, emphasizing the need for renewed energy and bold leadership. It advocates for deepened regional integration with the African Continental Free Trade Area as a foundation for prosperity, affirming African ownership of resources and policies. The AUDA-NEPAD served as a key instrument to bridge vision and implementation, ensuring that Africa's development is driven from within rather than imposed externally. However, we must also acknowledge that progress has not always occurred at the pace or scale required to transform the material conditions of our people. Significant gaps remain in infrastructure development, industrialization, productive capacity, energy access, logistics, digital connectivity, implementation capability, and regional economic integration. This moment, therefore, calls upon all of us to move beyond reflection and towards practical conversations about delivery at scale. As the Special Envoy to South Sudan, I have directly observed the profound desire for peace amongst its people. This yearning is not a far-off goal, but a daily hope reflected in their voices and expressions. They look to us for mediation and solidarity to ensure that peace is swiftly achieved. Their longing for peace is rooted in years of conflict and displacement, yet it is fueled by a steadfast belief in the potential for renewal. The people of South Sudan convey that peace encompasses not just the absence of war, but also the presence of dignity, opportunity, and reconciliation. Their hope serves as a compelling call for action, urging us to transcend divisions and prioritize the future of their children in our endeavors. and Pakistan, where instability and to humanity. South Africa emphasizes that peace and development are linked to dialogue and partnership, as demonstrated by the National Economic Development and Labour Council, NEDLAC. This platform unites government, business, labor, and civil society to shape policies that promote inclusive growth and social justice, highlight that development should be participatory and prosperity shared through consensus. This spirit of dialogue is not confined to South Africa. It is the same spirit that must animate Africa's. Just as NEDLAC connects diverse voices to build a common path for national progress, so too must Africa connect its regions, its economies, and its people to build a common path for continental renewal. Africa's market boasts more than 1.4 billion people across 55 countries. The African Continental Free Trade Area represents the largest free trade area in the world by population and presents a historic opportunity to reshape Africa's economic future. Yet, inter-African trade still accounts for only approximately 15% of total African trade, which remains insufficient for a continent seeking genuine economic sovereignty and long-term resilience. Africa cannot continue exporting raw materials while importing finished products at a higher value, because this model actually exports jobs, industrial capacity, technological upgrading, and opportunity outside the continent. To this end, the African Continental Free Trade Area presents one of the most catalytic opportunities available to the continent today. By strengthening the movement of goods, services, capital, people, innovation, and technology across borders, Africa has the opportunity to build stronger regional value chains, expand industrial production, lower the cost of trade, attract investments, and ensure that African wealth increasingly circulate within the continent. African ownership becomes meaningful when our developmental ambitions are practical delivery through infrastructure, logistics, industrialization, financing mechanisms, and capable institution. The CEO, you spoke a lot about this issue of financing, and it's something that we have to take very seriously. I heard you very well when you said you can't start an institution and you're not prepared to fund it. So that's very important. We need to take this seriously. And then Becky, I've assured the CEO, I assured the CEO when she got me in a corner this morning that South Africa will come to the party. Program directors, connecting Africa for development means breaking down barriers that fragment our economies. Investing in infrastructure that links markets and empowering our people with skills and opportunities that transcend borders to improve trade under the African Continental Free Trade Area. AUDA-NEPAD must enhance customs systems by digitizing and harmonizing border procedures with the Africa Continental Free Trade Secretariat, establishing compliance timelines and penalties. The future of Africa depends on beneficiation, manufacturing, processes, logistics integration, energy cooperation, digital industrialization. It requires African economies to move up the value chain by producing more of what they consume and processing more of what they extract. According to State Africa, energy insecurity and infrastructure deficit continue to drag down the manufacturing and distribution efficiency. Closing this energy gap would require an estimated 3.16 trillion rands annually, with less than half of African population having reliable access to electricity. More than half of Africa's energy supply relies on fossil fuels, leaving business vulnerable to volatile energy markets and risks during the global energy transition. In 2023, renewable energy investment in Africa totaled around 247.5 billion rands, only 2.3% of global renewable energy investment. Many African countries continue to be net food importers while having the potential for greater agricultural production. Rapid urbanization is underway, which is changing the demand patterns towards more processed food and changing consumer purchasing towards supermarkets. Imports of food have supported urbanization in the absence of a domestic agricultural surplus. However, food in African cities is around 35% more expensive. If food production is not treated as an industrialization question to manufacture and supply the processed food products demanded by urban consumers, African countries will record growing trade shortages in processed food products. The next phase of Africa's growth must therefore be driven by productive transformation, stronger regional value chains, and deeper continental integration that keeps wealth, production, innovation, and investment circulating within Africa. Addressing this constraint requires a coherent policy framework that promotes skills development, productivity, investment, infrastructure improvement, technology transfer, and competitive standards in international markets. Program Director, I must reiterate that achieving the goals of Agenda 2063 requires viewing regional integration as a practical endeavor rather than just a policy exercise. South Africa, in its chairpersonship of the Agenda 2063 Ministerial Follow-up Committee, will continue overseeing the implementation, coordination, monitoring, and evaluation of our continent's 50-year development blueprint. Our chairpersonship coincides with a decade of acceleration, 2024 to 2033, the period of the second 10-year implementation plan. The technical foundation has been laid, but critical gaps see it then.
in our written submissions is about the absurdity in bringing two contradictory causes of action. I know that was a different case, and I know that had to deal with specific